Hello again. Welcome, dear friends. This is another edition of the Brattlecast. We talk about books, rare, old, out of print, and not just books. We talk about everything from magazines to leaflets to pamphlets to rare collections to estate sales. You name it, we do it. Ken Gloss, of course, is the owner, operator of the famous, world-famous Brattle Bookshop in Boston. I'm Jordan Rich. And Ken, we've talked about this in the past. You're a guy who has a passion for what you do. You've been in the business your entire life. Your family is in it. But it's not necessarily the easiest take to start a bookstore. And you get that question occasionally. Can I get into the bookstore business? What do you tell people these days?
Well, it's interesting because we do get a lot of questions. People go, gee, isn't this the most wonderful thing? I wish I could do it maybe when I retire. Or some people maybe are out of work and having trouble finding, or it's forcing a change in their life. And they say, it would be so wonderful to work in a bookstore. Now, I totally and 100% agree with that it is wonderful to work in a bookstore. But the key word there is work. It's my wife likes to kid me, Joyce. She says, well, you're getting older, and I know you only work half a day. Well, I do work half a day now that I'm older. I get in at 5:30 in the morning. The store closes at 5:30 in the afternoon. It's 12 hours. It's half a day.
That's a half a day.
And many times I'm out talking, lecturing, and so on, even beyond that. So the one thing that we always tell people, a lot of people have dreams of opening that inn in Vermont or the restaurant, and it sounds great, but it's a lot of work. But I also wouldn't want to discourage anybody because it is a lot of fun. Also, when you're dealing with a small bookstore, in other words, nobody's going to say, oh, I want to open a chain of 100 bookstores. Maybe that's a dream somewhere along the line. But usually it's an idea of a small local bookstore. They envision their customers. And one of the things in your introduction that you said, that we talk about books, pamphlets, magazines, and so on, the most interesting thing usually in the bookstore is the people who work there and the people who come in to buy books. That's actually one of the best parts. So if you're thinking of that, it's great. It's fun. But the first thing I always tell people, and I'm willing to talk to anybody, if people call me up and say, we're interested in a bookstore, they call up, make an appointment, I'll sit down and talk with them. I want to encourage them. But the first thing I say, this is a business, and a business needs to make money. Now, 90% of the people who come in do it with the intention of making money. Quite honestly, maybe even 20, it might even be as high as 20 or 30%. Maybe they don't really need to make money. That's another thing altogether.
That's true with the retarees, perhaps, yeah.
Right. And, if it's a new bookstore, it's a lot different than a used and rare bookstore. I think one of the huge advantages to what I do is you never know what you're going to get. You don't necessarily always control what you're going to get, but you also, everything you get is yours. Whereas with a new bookstore, you can get almost all those books anywhere. So you have to make the bookstore something special. Also, you keep track of every single book, and you can return books, and there's huge amounts of paperwork. With me, I go out, I look at the books. Just this morning, I was in Newport, Rhode Island. We bought about 800 books. I said, I'll pay X. They said, fine. We box them up. They come to the store. They're mine. I'm pretty sure we'll make money on it.
So we're talking about when any business opens, storefront, inventory. You've got to have the inventory or else you're not selling anything. And when it comes to the new bookstores, it makes sense. The publishers send books and so forth and so on. You take your cut. But would you recommend anyone out there just opening up a storefront and saying, I want to have a used bookstore and starting from scratch? Or is it better to buy a big collection or an existing store that's ready to sell?
Well, one of the things I will say that I know someone who had very little business experience, who had almost no money, who really loved books, and about 75 years ago, just decided to open a bookstore.
Let me
My
guess.
father.
Right.
My father. And, if you did a profile of someone who was going to succeed in a business, he probably would not have been it. So, yes, you can do it, and just by sheer force or will or personality, yeah, you could get a storefront. What we actually find, a lot of people who I talk to say, well, I've collected books for my whole life. I've got 5,000 books in the house, and that will start, I'm going to use that, most of it, as the starting stock. And I say, that's fabulous. And you'll probably do extremely well in the first month or two. But how are you going to replace that stock? You have to have a plan, because a used bookstore, one of the things I say about it, and one of the things that we're very fortunate about, is if someone goes into a used bookstore, looks around the store, maybe buys a few books, they go back, let's say a month later, they look at the shelves. If they're about the same, they go, well, okay, maybe they'll get more in. They go back a few months after that, and it hasn't changed. Then it gets boring and they won't come back. So you sort of have to have an idea whether it's going to the library, yard sales, whether it's you have connections with law offices or antique dealers. But you have to, ahead of time, sort of plan, where am I going to get additional stock?
A lot of hustling, in other words. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way. It means you have to really be on the go, as you are almost every day, searching out potential leads for book collections. And it's not just books, it's magazines, as we mentioned, pamphlets, postcards, you name it. You've got to keep up with the times.
Exactly. But one of the things that I also talk to people about is, in the used book business, you can have a store like mine, a large, open, general secondhand bookstore. And when I say large, in secondhand bookstore terms, it's a large bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
On corporate terms of the United States, it's a tiny, tiny business. But you don't have to have that type of business. You could maybe specialize. Maybe you're a physicist and you love the sciences, and you know other scientists who are always looking for books. Maybe you just specialize in mathematics, science. Maybe you do it from your attic, cellar, basement. Maybe you rent a small office area. And through advertising or word of mouth, it gets out there that you have whatever the subject is. I picked physics, but it could be cookbooks, it could be books on construction, it could be almost any subject. And you become a specialist just in that area. And people who have libraries say, well, he's the specialist. I'll sell to him or her. She's the specialist in this. If we're going to get it, this is the person to track down the book. So a lot of times people can do that out of an office with a stock of maybe 3 or 4 or 500 books, and maybe where they're not open 9 to 5:30, they can go on vacation sometimes too, or much of it you can even do online remotely now. So you don't have to pin down one specific area. Now, one of the things, though, that is important is you've got to really learn about whatever area you're doing, because there are a lot of books. I'll walk into someone's house, I'll quickly look at the shelves and go, this isn't worth even moving. Other times I'll look at that and go, 95% of this isn't worth moving, but those 5 or 10 books there are quite valuable. Do I buy the whole collection because I want to get those? Do I get those out? But you can learn. And one of the ways you can learn, first of all, there's a school called CABS, which is Antiquarian Book School. It's in the Midwest every summer for about 2 weeks. It's a fabulous school that teaches about the used and rare book business. They have dealers from around the country who are specialists. It's a cost to it, but not overwhelmingly. And there are 2 or 3 major advantages. And I always when I talk with people, and I think they're really serious, I recommend this school. which if you get in touch with me, we can give you all of the references to. Uh, because not only do you get great information from these people, get a bit of grounding in the business of used books, but sometimes your best friends in the business become the other students that you've gone to the school with, and they go out to dinner together. They talk about their hopes and dreams. A lot of them work already in bookstores, and they can tell you about where they work and what they're trying to learn. And it's a fabulous way to get started in asking questions.
Well, you and I have talked on many occasions about the important role of appraising books, appraising estate sales, and so forth. And that's what you're talking about. I mean, it's one thing to say, I've got 500 books and let's get rolling. But adding to those books, you want to make sure you know the right kind of books to select. And that's where this school seems to make great sense.
Absolutely. And the other thing that someone could say, I really don't care about buying and selling books, but I love books. I like talking to people about their libraries. Maybe I can just be an advisor. I can advise someone who wants to collect this type of book or that type, how to go about it, what type of space it might take, what type of time, what type of valuations. Or another aspect of that is maybe they literally become professional appraisers, where people who need to donate their books, you can get an appraisal for tax purposes, for insurance, for other reasons. You don't buy and sell, but you just do appraisals. And many dealers do not like doing formal appraisals. I mean, my business, the way we make money is buying and selling books. I will give evaluations to people. I'll tell them what things are worth. I don't charge for that in most cases. But if you need a very formal written appraisal, you actually want somebody who is not wanting to buy your books, who is not involved in the collection of the books, but who is a completely independent source. And a lot of times, depending on how good you are at it and who you're dealing with, you charge by the hour. And some people charge what a good lawyer will get. Some people will charge what they feel is a fair price. They get to go to loads of places, they see people, and they get huge numbers of referrals from people like me, because many times what I'll do is someone will call me with an appraisal. I know they want to sell it. I don't want to be the appraiser because ethically you can't then offer to buy. I'll say, look, get in touch with this appraiser. They'll do the appraisal, and then I'll be happy to come in and talk with you. So when you're saying, do you want to start a bookstore? You say, well, what kind of bookstore do you want to start? How big a bookstore? Do you have financial backing? Are you going to do a retail store? Do you have knowledge already? If you're a collector in a particular field, you might be an expert in that. Do you want to stick with that? Do you like working with the public? That's an important part. There are some book dealers, I assure you, would much rather be up in their attic room, maybe answer some emails, and never talk to anybody.
Right. I was also thinking of people who neglect things like incorporating or sales tax or all the elements that go into any business. And it might be a passion and all that, but you've got to also dot your I's and cross your T's.
One of the things that I always tell people, and this came from experience when our store burnt down, the day it burnt down, which was in February of 1980, literally it was a 150-year-old building and it burnt down. We had almost no insurance because at that time it was a rundown area. You couldn't get it. But that morning, the fire chief said to me, do you want to call your demolition company or ours? But the building is dangerous. It needs to be demolished. Guess what? I had never heard of something called demolition insurance. What little insurance we had didn't even cover the demolition.
You found out the hard way, yeah.
But what I always tell people now, even when I do lectures and talk about that, I say, look, if you own a commercial building, call your insurance agent. Make sure you have demolition insurance.
Absolutely.
Make sure you have transportation insurance. So yes, all of those factors are very, very important. And they all have to be considered and so on. And I've seen people who ignore everything I say, jump into it, love it, and are successful. And with any little small businesses, you see loads of people who do lots of prep, and just for one reason or another, it doesn't work out. But I'd say going to these schools, talking to other dealers, talking to librarians, asking a lot of questions, get a sense of it. And I really encourage it, because if it works out, it's fabulous.
And as listeners know, the phone will ring, so you've got to pay a phone company charge as well at some point or another. Ken, thank you as always. People can follow up with questions, brattlebookshop.com, specific questions about that school or anything else. I know you're very open and willing to share information with people.
Or if anyone has any questions about any type of books, but what the business aspect is, absolutely. One of the things I always say, and this is almost universal, probably yourself too, if you ask somebody about their profession, whatever, something that they love and they do, if you ask them questions, the problem isn't getting an answer. It's getting them to stop answering.
And on that note, we'll conclude another Brattlecast. Ken Gloss, thank you so much.
Thank you.